Could you imagine being that size and you just fly your way over and you land on the side of this flower and you just vibrate your body so intensely?
Birds flying in my bird bowl, the illusion of freedom, standing 10 feet tall. Part of nature. Obviously, if you walk in the forest barefoot, you're really leaning into it more than if you're just, in bubble wrap all of the time.
The answer is simple. The truth is back to nature. That's it. I think that's it. What do you think about that?
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Today is Sunday, December 10th, and I am almost in the Arctic Circle. That's how far north I am in the world. Where are you, Gregory?
Yes. I am not as far north as you. I am in Florida, and I'm experiencing probably very different weather than you are. It's like in the 60s and nice and cozy.
Wow.
I imagine you're not even attempting to go outside at this point.
Well, you have to go outside to survive, but I'm not going out as much as I would be in the summer, that's for sure.
I'm excited, although I am still very curious to see how the lack of sunlight is going to impact my experience when I come and hang out with you in Norway. I don't know how they do it.
You get it in the morning through light pads and other things, then you get outside as soon as the sun comes up. That's the way to go. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe there's some resilience in it as well.
Yeah.
I think that Norwegians appreciate summer more than anyone else in the world. When it's summertime, everybody is outside there. And I mean everybody. Like the beaches, they are shoulder to shoulder packed. And everybody is in their swimsuits trying to soak in the sun. It's an event.
How warm does it actually ever get at peak summer?
Oh, in like Oslo and other parts on the southern areas of Norway, it gets 80 degrees Fahrenheit sometimes. It's not cold at all in the summer. It's nice and it's very sunny and beautiful.
Yeah. And the days are super long. So then you see the sun all the time. And
that's true.
A great thing.
They are a lot longer. Yeah. The shift is quick. It's really fun because one day to the next, there could be a 15-minute time difference in the sunlight. That's how fast it changes when you're like really going up towards those peaks, which is wild.
Yeah. It makes me think about how your location on Earth, especially as you're moving on the latitudes, it's providing a very different experience as seasons occur. And so I imagine people's relationship with nature is just very different from place to place compared to, someone living in Norway versus somebody that sits at the equator. Because seasons can really affect our moods and personalities as we go through.
Yeah, that's
life.
probably half of the study of anthropology. Different geographical regions and how all of those climates affected the people there. Culture is so intertwined with climate. It's really wild when you don't think about it too much. But Japan, for example, in the harshness of winter thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, perhaps, the survival was very different. It was about having enough grain to survive, and that was what was most important. And they actually, when someone in the family got too old, they would take them up on a backpack, like the kids would carry them up in a backpack, and then they would drop them off at the top of the mountain because they didn't have enough food to support them as a member of the family tribe anymore. So it was a different world. It was very dire, and things depended on the weather a lot and the harvest.
That's intense.
Was that too dark?
It's very kind of dark. It's maybe not as dark as Norway in the winter, but pretty dark.
Nice. Well said. Well, let's jump into this. I mean, we're already talking about it, but let's officially state it. We're here to talk about the beauty of nature, which is something near and dear to everyone because we're all animals, and especially us. We really love nature, and a big part of the reason why we started Lifeform in general was because we love nature and we wanted to bring people closer to nature, which is why we're making a product and also why we're having this conversation.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up as a primary point of conversation. In preparation for this conversation, I read through a lot of old journals of mine and lots of just contemplation and philosophical thoughts, and I just realized that nature has played a huge part in my life, even more so than maybe I even recollected. Just naturally, it permeates a lot of my thinking, and I feel way more alive the closer I feel to nature and one with nature. And it was just very revitalizing to think through a lot of the reasons, I've fallen in love with nature in the first place and what it's done for me in my life. So I'm really excited to share a lot of that beauty that I have just been mesmerized by over the past few years as I continue to get closer and closer to nature, and just share some of that beauty with everybody today. But more broadly, being able to help cultivate actual visceral experiences for people through an actual physical product beyond just listening to what we're talking about today, being able to have
Yeah,
something that people can live in or just explore in and be able to take them to new frontiers is very exciting to me. So anyway,
for sure. And to fill in anybody who doesn't know, because that might be a lot of people, we are making a cube system. You could call it that. We're starting with the base cube, as we like to say, which is basically a small cube, about 30 by 30 by 60 centimeters, that you can carry with you, and you can set it up anywhere else. And it's modular and adaptable. It's a living system, as we like to say. And then you can use it as an outdoor office with open walls, or perhaps you want to put up walls in it or functionalize that however you want. You could sleep in it. You could make a mobile cafe, or you could make a micro home, or really you could make a shelving unit and have some beautiful shelves in nature and film a podcast. Whatever you want to do with it.
yes, which
The
we're
idea
trying
is
to.
that you bring it with you and you experience nature in a new way through the utilization of this product. So that's what we're making. We're very excited to make it. We're also making podcasts and content outside of that in Lifeform Labs, which is where we are now. And the reason why I think we wanted to bring people closer to nature is exactly as you're saying. We've had a lot of good experiences with it. And I'm going to drop a really interesting perspective here that maybe people haven't thought about as much. But it seems to be in the 21st century, we are trying things and we're moving further away from what actually brings us peace and joy, thinking that we're following a path that is doing that. So, in other words, we are often hurting ourselves by doing things that we feel are making our lives better. We're trying to gain a lot of money. We're trying to live inside of boxes, homes. We're trying to eat in a certain way that gives us dopamine hits, but in the end ruins the baseline of our dopamine levels and makes us more unhappy on a general level. I think the number of examples of this are quite large, but the answer is simple. The truth is back to nature. That's it. I think that's it. What do you think about that?
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. We are 100% unequivocally natural nature. We are a part of it as much as any other animal or living species, any part of the earth and the environment, and just general ecology overall. And modern society has pulled us away from that. And a lot of human ingenuity and invention has been in the process of extracting and taking things away from nature and molding it into something a bit more human, or I would not necessarily more human in the natural sense, but more around the ideology of what we thought it's meant to be human, more industrialized, civilized ways of doing things, but that isn't congruent with the natural world. And for example,
Yeah.
leveraging fossil fuels to create and operate automobiles and various other machinery, which further extract resources from the environment. And then we are taking all of these things and combining them in new ways, which I think is there are parts of that process that are truly beautiful, but we have, I think, failed nature in generally the ecosystem by thinking that we are other than nature, and therefore we don't respect it, I think, in the ways that we should. And for every new invention that we create that doesn't have nature in the center, a respect for it in the center, it further separates us and isolates us from the oneness of it all. So
yeah, I like the way that you put that. And my perfect example of this is plastic plants. Plastic plants. I'm declaring war on plastic plants. I've done it. I've done it
Yes.
for years now. Plastic plants are the bastardization of nature because they harm us. They don't biodegrade, and they're literally there to trick us. They're like the definition of what the devil does, right? He tries to like lure you in and make you feel happier through the convenience, perhaps, but it's all a lie. Mm-hmm. And as you'll see, I have only real plants around me. I'm feeling much better in nature. They're helping me breathe, and plastic plants are destroying every ideal of nature, I think. Even though they are like an embodiment, a piece of art, and I can see the value in the subconscious that they could bring, but we'd be better off trying to take care of real plants in every scenario, I think. So there we go. I've said it. I declare war on plastic plants. Next point.
Yes, and I do apologize for ever owning one. I will not make that mistake again. You got on me one time. But totally justified. So I think that kind of sets us, I appreciate you bringing the point of around overall society and culture and how it is today and how we are largely separated from it. We have both went through journeys to be able to find our way back to it. And there's probably a lot of beauty and things that we've uncovered along the way. Do you want to continue the conversation by sharing the beauty of nature, how you've experienced it, and any insights? What does that look like for you?
I think this is great because every person has a personal experience, and they've been different places, and they have locations that are special to them, which I think is what it's all about. It's the memories that you have interacting with nature or being in an environment that make it special. Some of the ones that stand out to me, one time I snuck in to a botanical garden in Italy when I was living there years ago. I really wanted to go to this botanical garden, and when I went, it was closed that day. And because I guess I was young and wild, I decided I was going to try to sneak in, and somebody entered with a like scan card, and I like snuck in as the door was closing without a plan on how I was going to get out. And I like wandered around in there, and I was really enjoying my time because it was completely empty. It was very intimate, and there were some beautiful plants, and it was very well kept for. It might have been under a research designation at the time. I'm not sure, but there were a couple other people in there doing research and taking notes on things. So I just pretended to do the same thing and walked around and like got some very strange looks after a while. And after I had some nice time in there, I took some notes and wandered, trying to figure out how I was going to get out. I went into this kind of central office room, and there was a button to open the door to get out. So it was like a big red button. I don't know if this felt like a dream, but it actually happened. And I hit the button, and the door opened up and unlocked, but the alarm started going off.
You never hit the red button.
Yeah, maybe I hit the wrong one. Maybe there was a green button I missed, but I ran into the to the subway as the alarm was going off, and I could tell people inside were very confused. And that was a memory I will always have with nature. That time with the plants when I had to sneak in to give them some love, I guess.
Mm, that's a lovely
um,
story.
yeah, it
Why
was
was that
fun.
beautiful?
I think it was probably a mix of the adrenaline, but also
Mm,
the fact that I knew I was in a place that was closed off, but I feel like there was some deeper metaphor in there about not keeping nature from the availability of people or animals in general.
mm.
Like nature is for everybody. It shouldn't be closed off and safeguarded, which is maybe a big reason why I wanted to go in there so badly.
Yeah, I was
I
very
think,
curious about that. You risked it all for plants. That's super
yeah.
noble. And I don't think most people would do that. So I was very interested to hear what drove you, what made
Oh
it
my
worth
gosh, I want that on a shirt. I risked it all for plants.
it. More people should. Uh, that's a great
um,
story.
thank you. Yeah. Why don't you tell us one and I'll share some more after.
Definitely. I would say I haven't done any type of heist situation or anything super extravagant. I would
Nice.
say my nature experiences have been a bit more just subtle, mundane, down to earth experiences, but it's pretty fascinating that those are some of the most vivid experiences of my life, like what otherwise might be considered mundane, which in a way nature is because it's everywhere, but at the same time, it's so intricate, complex, and there's so many layers to it when it comes to different animals and species and plants and the smells of things. It's so rich and complex. And so when you really take the time to like tap into nature and not just be there, but really experience and be with it, it can take what might at the surface be a mundane experience and really elevate it to a profound memory for your life. And so I've had a few. I think one of my favorites is really tied to the concept of running because I'm a huge runner, and that's going to come up at time and time again. I think in these podcast episodes because I do it so much, and it's primary catalyst in how I've been able to connect with nature over time. I used to spend most of my running indoors on a treadmill, especially when it was cold outside and things like that. I just didn't want to be super uncomfortable. But as the seasons warmed up, as well as me just kind of taking it and saying, you know what, I don't care if it's cold outside. Like I want to do this. I want to experience the environment as it is today, even if it is maybe not as comfortable as, a beautiful summer day. But there are parts of that experience that are going to be more beneficial in certain areas. Like there's certain lessons in the cold, harsh winter that you just can't get in the summer. There are moments that you might want to experience. And so even if it turns out badly sometimes. And so I was going, it was just, I would say it was like February or March, and I'm in Salt Lake City at the time. And there's still just so much snow everywhere. And I'm just getting this itch to like go on a proper trail run up in the mountains. And just warmer weather, spring could not come quick enough, and it seemed like it just took forever. And so one weekend I was like, you know what? It started to melt reasonably, but mostly down in the valley as opposed to up in the mountains. And I didn't really take that into consideration, but going up into the mountains, the snowpack started to increase, and I wasn't turning back. I was just like, I am committing to like getting some mileage in today. And so I had my road shoes on, and that also wasn't a very smart idea because you end up not getting a lot of traction, so to speak. And maybe that's foreshadowing, but I was able to go and run up a mountain. So I get out and beautiful, crisp air. I start going and it feels great. I'm overjoyed that I'm able to get back up in nature and get up into elevation so I can, one, admire the beauty of the mountains and just like how majestic they are in terms of how they sit above, I think, society in a lot of ways and how they tower over just everything. And it makes you feel so small in a certain way. And for some reason, that smallness brings me comfort because I feel like I'm just a part of something bigger. But being able to experience that and then be able to overlook like the city and everybody looks so small and everybody and like looks like people like little ants within ant beds that are just digging tunnels, and we have our roads and everything. It's just so different. It's like it feels in a way it feels natural in a certain way, but it also feels somewhat disconnected because it's a little bit too organized and everything's in straight lines. Not in all cities, but at least in Salt Lake City, there's a lot of grid system going on. And so it was just very interesting to see how I'm just in nature and I can be more or less sitting in the chaos, the chaotic, sporadic, spontaneous way nature unfolds in the landscape with shrubs here and there and snow patches here and there and so forth, and then looking down and seeing all the structure that humans have created. And there's like a lot of dissonance there. And it was great to feel that separation and being separated from it way up in the mountains. But it ultimately ended with me going downhill because once you know what goes up must come down. And so on my way back, I maybe started to go a little bit too quick, and there was ice patches up on the trail that caused me to slip and fall, and I slid like 30 feet. It was
down the mountain,
pretty steep. Yeah, down the mountain, which was not fun. Got a few scrapes here and there. So I definitely learned my lesson to not like run way up in the snowpack without some actual spikes or something along those lines, just a little bit more traction. But I just couldn't help myself. I really needed that escape, and I'm glad I did it ultimately, even if I did get a little bit bruised up on the other side. I really needed that mental space, and I felt so trapped in the city and felt trapped in the roads and the boxes, and it was 100% worth it. So
yeah, that's great. I think I can relate to that feeling trapped in the city at times. I've lived in Tokyo a lot and every time I'm there, I feel really great in the city for the city reasons, but it's very difficult to get outside of the city without planning a day trip at least. And so when you want to go to nature, there are really nice parks there, but they only get you so far, like a certain feeling. You don't feel like you're in the wild, obviously, of nature.
Right.
I think there's great value in that. And maybe this is a good segue as well to talk about some of the animals or plants or insects that we have experienced or have learned about that are really cool. Because I think that nature is amazing. Nature is so awesome.
Yes.
So let's talk about a few things that are awesome within nature. Like one, I want to start with bees. Bees are so pivotal to our survival and to flowering of the food that we eat, the pollination of it. They're not just beautiful, amazing creatures, but they can actually do really incredible things as well. Like when they go to get pollen from a flower, they actually shake their bodies at sonic welding speeds, and they release the pollen by just literally vibrating that flower to an unbelievable level. Like you can't see it because it's so fast. And that must be what an experience. Could you imagine being that size and you just fly your way over and you land on the side of this flower and you just vibrate your body so intensely that it's I can't even, I don't know what to relate it to because I don't know if I've experienced that. But and then there's like pollen flying in the air and it's all over you, and you get up and fly and you go to the next one and you're like living as this creature of a tribe with hundreds of thousands of other bees. Just what a wild life.
Do you know about the waggle dance?
A little bit. Why don't you expand? Yeah.
Because this reminded me of that, because not only do they like vibrate rapidly, but I find it interesting how different animals and species go about their lives and what they tend to do on a day-to-day basis. For example, like how bees spend the majority, at least worker bees are going to be spending a lot of their time going and working through pollination. And that is one, very fascinating, but how they then communicate to other people, the other bees and bees and their just other beings of their tribes and species, their colony, they do so through a really complex dance, basically. And that's a very human way of conveying what they're doing. They're probably not maybe quote unquote dancing per se, but that's how it maybe appears to us when we study them.
Or maybe
But
maybe
maybe
they
they are
are. Who
dancing.
knows?
Maybe they are dancing. And so whenever they find like certain food sources, they can communicate that by dancing in a certain way. And it can tell like other bees, we hypothesize it can tell them like the direction of the food, the distance away from it, the quality of the food source, which is very fascinating to me because it makes me imagine like instead of us just communicating with our mouths, we obviously have other mannerisms. But what if we started communicating in dance? And like I just started busting out some moves to communicate some really complex topic to you. And that just fascinates me.
I mean, sometimes we do. You want to leave a party or you want to go somewhere and you don't want somebody else to hear you, so you just start dancing like with some pointed fingers to the who you're with, so they know it's time to go. Right? We got
Yeah.
levels. That's great. I was just thinking like there are so many places that encapsulate different connections with different types of insects. I almost just want to like rapid fire some that I've had. Like in Hawaii, I lived in Hawaii earlier this year, helping my friend build a house. And in that rainforest, there are so many insects I had never seen. There's wild boars running around in the forest behind their house that they're at. And so I would go on these walks back there with his 5-year-old kid, and it was so much fun. We were all like on these adventures, but we would see all these wild animals, and he would point them out and talk about them, and I would like just no, I have no idea what these animals are. The different kinds of birds, different kinds of insects. I don't know if they're probably mostly safe, but I mean, who knows really? And it's still a bit unstudied in Hawaii. So there's like that beautiful lush rainforest, but at the same time, uh, in Norway, like in the summer or the fall time, there's wild mushrooms and blueberries and lingonberries, and you got to pick them and forage. And then out there's like deep, lush moss that you sink into with every step. And you're going through this complete opposite environment as well. And they have less predators here, wild animal predators, but they have wild reindeer. And normally a buck, like in America, for example, a large buck would be very aggressive and perhaps dangerous, or a moose. But here the reindeer are quite timid, and they will just come up. And like even when we were in the mountains before, they just came up and walked right by us a couple of feet away. They have wild moose here as well, and black bears or the brown bears, I think, actually not black, but they're way more timid. Like they're afraid of humans here. So nature is just very different everywhere that you go. When you were on the ocean, I mean, it's a complete different world out there too. The endless ocean blue, you're in somebody else's home.
Yes. It's
Context.
interesting that you brought that up, because growing up, I spent the majority of my childhood growing up on the water and snorkeling and, wakeboarding, boats, jet skiing, lots of things. I've done a little bit of scuba, and you're surrounded by marine life, which is so alien. And even being a part of the environment, to some extent, I mean, nowhere approaching what it would be like in the deep, deep sea, but being exposed to marine life for years, it still feels very odd to me to see a jellyfish wash up on shore, or see stingrays swim by in like crystal waters and like in schools together, migrating, and they're so beautiful. But it's like I can't imagine what it's like to experience the world through their lens, and that goes for typical animals as well, whether it's an insect or even a dog, for example. But marine life especially, I just feel like there's a lot it can teach us. There's so much still that we have to learn, so many species we have yet to cover. But it just really leans into the concept of diversity. And it blows my mind how diverse nature really is, which I think is what you're leaning into. And I mean, beyond just total species, but or total types of animals between the sea and the land, but even within particular animals, or what we would label as like a beetle, for example, there's over 350,000 species of beetle, and that's just beetle. And then you have, and then you have flies and butterflies, moths, and every other insect in the world. And there's so many variations of spiders and so forth. And it's kind of crazy just how much variation there is. And then even between moods and how people, and like you're saying, with just timid levels, it's how different species and organisms adapt to their environment. And the reason they came about in the first place is a very fascinating concept to me. I think there's a lot to learn
It definitely
in the diversity.
Absolutely. And even the diversity is beautiful, but even the narrowness of how multiplicitous it is. When I brought up a couple episodes ago about worms, well, I misspoke saying that there is over 1 million worms for each human. It was way off. There's 40 billion nematode worms for each human being on Earth. So let that sink in for a minute. There's 9 billion 9 billion plus humans, and for every single one of those humans there's 40 billion nematode worms, 4 times the population of Earth per human in worms. Just this one kind of worm, this one single worm. Those worms live in the ocean, which makes a lot of sense because there's more ocean than land, but it's still an incredible fact. I really like to think about the levels of these, and I also wanted to bring a nice practical point and takeaway that people can utilize in their life, which is to go to the Natural History Museum. Every city has such a cool Natural History Museum. At least for me, I love going to the Natural History Museum, and some of the biggest and coolest ones I've been to were in Italy and in Austria. Austria has maybe the largest mineral collection and a huge insect and animal collection as well. There's a few natural history museums in Italy that have like beetles, just walls and walls and walls of maybe 200,000 beetles and butterflies. And it's overwhelming, but in a really interesting, fun way. And it makes you realize how secular all of this is. Like even humans are very similar, but we feel we're very diverse because we're so in tune with being around other humans. But there's that is like a drop in the bucket, a little nuance compared to the diversity of life.
And we're just talking about things that like move and so forth. I mean, that aren't like necessarily connected to the earth directly, which is flowers, other species of like plants, which is actually insane too, because there's so much diversity there. Life takes so many forms. And I think that's, I don't know.
We all might be connected to some level though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a beautiful thing, is like the microbes and the bacteria and the viruses and everything that coexist within us. They also connect us to other plants and other animals. And we walk in the forest barefoot, and those organisms get onto our body and off of our body, and they spread through the soil. And animals walk and they eat plants, and then they digest them, and then they poop them out, and then those same organisms that went through all of that perhaps transform and grow into something else, or fertilize and help a certain kind of plant. I mean, there's so many levels that we don't think about on a daily basis. Like literally your feet have these amazing symbiotic organisms that you can share and foster and also improve through grounding in the forest or spending time walking in the desert or wherever it is. I think that's a wonderful thought, that we also share that with plants and fungi and everything else.
I think so too. I'm glad you brought that, the concept of one scale, because life is really big in some, it's all relative of course, but life is big and life is small, and we're all interdependent on each other. And I think that's what the world ecology really is about. And just having like symbiotic relationships. It's one thing to just be in awe of the diversity of plants and the different scales at which that, biological organisms occur. But like you're saying, it's your own body has tons of microbes on it, and it's important to be aware of it. I think that's the first step. But then being aware of it, admiring it, and then appreciating it and respecting that fact that you are reliant and you are 100%, a part of nature. Obviously, if you walk in the forest barefoot, you're really leaning into it more than if you're just, in bubble wrap all of the time. There's benefits
In bubble wrap.
leaning, but it's important to lean into those because it can ultimately make you a healthier person and, strengthen your immune system, whatever it might be. Like, there's things that are out there to help you, and there's symbiotic relationships that you should probably be trying to cultivate by getting out into nature more and not being so closed off from it.
Yeah, I think even to just take it further, because you were saying like there's recognizing that there are microbes on our bodies. They're like our bodies are microbes. Like we are in that symbiosis all the time. Making your immune system stronger is just another way of saying that you're actually just building a more diverse symbiosis system. You are like improving the colony of you, because you are not just you are a colony of many forms of life. It's amazing.
It truly is. Okay.
Can we?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have had this thought lately about scents, because I've been using different essential oils for many things, and I was thinking about where these naturally occur, because I love jasmine and like Roman chamomile, many floral scents, but also there's so many different forms of trees that you can get essential oils from. There's pines, there's many Japanese trees that I love to smell, and I even use my toothpaste is even made out of this Japanese hiba wood, which is, it only grows in Japan, and it's the most antimicrobial wood in the world, and it just has this such a unique flavor, and it's very strange to brush your teeth with trees, but it's also amazing.
I love the things that come out of your mouth. That's great.
It is. I don't know why it's so great, but it is. And I like to almost bring the nature in to my space by humidifying and using those essential oils, or putting them on some natural wool balls in the dryer, and or on some of my clothes, etc. But then I was thinking, where in nature have I experienced some great scents? I wonder if you can think of any off the top of your head that we could share, like some favorite places or some favorite natural smells that you've experienced. One of my favorite ones was actually at the Brea tar pits in California, where there's these tar pits that many dire wolves and some different dinosaurs fell into over the years, and it preserved their bodies perfectly. And the tar pits are still active there. So when you get close, you just smell the most intense. It's almost like a sweet molasses version of asphalt. It doesn't smell as, like, I would say, rotten and impure as asphalt to me. It smelled a bit more sweet and interesting, almost like a caramel tar pit, if you could imagine that. And you get closer, and it's literally this black pool, and you can see the bubbles coming up, and like, you're just so in tune with that because it's such a strong scent. And then you go down and you start viewing all the bones of these animals, and they're all tinted this deep brownish red caramel color because they've all been covered in the tar for thousands of years. And it was a beautiful experience, and it was a natural occurring scent that you would not smell very many places, and probably just there, and maybe like one or two other places in the world that I would think of. That was really unique, and it was very powerful, and I enjoyed it a lot.
It seems like it left a huge impression on you, which I find scents seem to do. There's something about smell that's super connected to the way you experience in a moment.
Memories,
especially when it's such
sure.
a unique smell. Right, yeah. It's something that you haven't really ever come across before. It's particularly potent. That's really fascinating to me. I'm trying to imagine this smell right now. Caramel asphalt. I really want a candle that smells like that for some reason. I want to see what that's like.
I have no idea if it would be healthy or not. Yeah, you should just go.
Yeah, no. I don't know if I have anything quite like that, at least on the top of my head. But I will say, just again, like a lot of my experiences have been maybe more mundane, but nevertheless very exciting. I
Like, do you have a favorite
love.
flower smell, for example, or like a floral smell that you like more than others?
I'm not sure. I like smelling flowers for sure, and I will most often, obviously in the spring and summer. Most of my daily walks will be passing through some type of flower garden or whatever it might be, especially in like downtown areas where there's just flowers growing out from like door fronts. And I take the time to stop and smell the roses, and it's one of my favorite things to do. To just really pull me into the moment. That is something I love about smell, is how it does just pull you right there. And in a lot of ways, you can't really describe what you're smelling, and words would only
That is
really kind of do
interesting,
it
actually.
injustice. And so I think it's really great for me to lean into those smells and just kind of sit with it and enjoy it, and then kind of move on, and not really have to like worry about like explaining it per se. I don't
Maybe
know what
this
it is about it, but
maybe
yeah.
one scent can become a poem. Like, I feel like that's ripe for poetry, because poetry is describing the indescribable in some ways, and maybe you should try
Yes,
that. Lean into the trying to write an entire poem around one scent that you experienced. Like,
that
some
would
more
be
beautiful
really
ones.
fun.
Yeah, please do. Please share. Bring it to whatever episode we come in. Just say like, here's the scent poem. It's time to share. um,
Okay.
a couple more quick ones that come to mind for me that I really enjoyed. One was going trail running. I went on the Wasatch 100. There's this section that we were pacing someone for, which is this 100-mile trail run through the mountains with just tons of elevation gain and loss. We did it in the summer, but it was after heavy rains, which was an incredible time because the wildflowers were coming up. And we came out of this forest, so this kind of dense forest, and into this open field of wildflowers with just hundreds of thousands of purple, blue, yellows, so many different kinds of flowers, just endless landscape with rolling mountains and hills in the background. And the scent was overwhelming. It was just like being hit with fresh laundry, but in the natural way. No fake fragrances. It was spectacular. I don't think I've smelled such a richness and fullness of a floral scent, except for
Mhm.
perhaps this next one, which is one of my favorite things to do, which is go into a flower shop, a floral shop, a plant shop. You get hit with that humidity and like the beauty of the scent within the location, because there's so many flowers in there that are usually for sale, and so many different varieties. Like, that culmination coming together, I think, with the humidity and just the connection with the greenness, like you just feel better. It uplifts your mood, and everyone is a little bit unique. This is also why I love going to botanical gardens and going into the glass domes, because everyone smells different depending on what flora and fauna are being grown and thriving in there. And that's a very unique way to connect with plants that you can't do on a normal everyday basis, I would say, because the scents are too subtle unless they're in a plethora. So that's another
Right.
thing that I would recommend. Maybe if you're feeling a little bit down, go to a
Yeah, that
flower
makes a lot
shop
of
or a plant
sense.
shop and just
I
walk inside and just take in the
love the
moment and
smell
smell
of
the
earth
flowers
and
and
green,
the
and
whatevers.
there's a lot
Maybe
of
buy one if
variations
you
of
want.
that. I don't know what might make the most sense in terms of to describe it, but
Are you
being
there,
able to,
Gregory? Did we lose
yeah,
you?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I can hear you. Go on.
Sorry, I was talking. Hopefully, we're probably gonna need to edit a little bit of this issue, but we'll get through it. But ultimately, I just find it very fascinating how like connected you are to smell and how you relate that to nature. I love smelling flowers, for example. I also love the smell of water and moisture and just general earthiness and green, if that makes any sense. Especially like
Mm-hmm.
after it rains or something and the moisture of the air carries the smell of soil. That is really potent of an experience for me, and I really enjoy it. But a lot of my more emotional experiences with nature have definitely come from more of the seeing and the hearing, like the auditory components of nature, um, more so than the smell, which I think is interesting. It seems like smell has been particularly potent for you. in your relationship to nature? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel a very strong connection to smell because it's such an underutilized and under-recognized sense, but it's very integral to the way that we eat, to the way that we um, taste and see a space because we visualize a space, but that visualization
Mm-hmm.
gets colored with scent, which I think is a wonderful way to think about it. And the unfortunate people that happen to lose their scent have described it as being a very big impact on their life. And I think that's because it has so many subtle underlying tones. That's why I love scent so much. But I also really enjoy visuals, and I enjoy the heat and the feeling of the texture of nature and being in different locations. I think the vividness of it is perhaps that it's multisensory, that there's so much information coming in on such a deep level, and it feels real. What's the best way to describe it? I mean, how do you even describe this? It's natural. It is the way it's supposed to be. When you're in nature and you're not in a synthetic man-made environment, you just feel like you're in the right place. Would you agree with that?
I agree. Yes. I think it has something to do with the feeling of the oneness, interconnectedness, feeling of safety,
Belonging, perhaps?
belonging,
Hmm.
and you can like let your guard down and relax into it and feel it a bit more. And it just creates a sense of peace and serenity. And it's why there's tons of research on this, but it's why being in nature tends to lower anxiety and depression and just overall increases well-being, which I think anybody that's really spent some time in nature can attest to. So it's a full-on sensory experience that just feels right. And I think that's just because we are nature and we are 100% connected to it. And at a biochemical level, like there are probably tons of processes going on between the things that we smell, the way sunlight hits our eyes, the way things hear to us. We are completely biologically attuned to those types of vibrations of nature. And so consequently, like when we surround ourselves in them and we bathe in them, we're going to feel more natural and more in our the way we're supposed to feel, like in our natural state. There's probably a more eloquent way to say it, but you get what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sure that that is pretty accurate, though. It hasn't been that long since we were hunting and gathering in the grand scheme of things, or perhaps since we were evolving in a
Definitely
distant form.
Which
that's also fun. That's also fun to think about, that we share so much of our genes, like 95+% of our genes, with almost all living creatures. I mean, we are almost the same. It's very subtle differences, not major differences, that differentiate us.
Which is insane to me, because the proportion between between a percentage of gene change to the amount of diversity that is created is insane. Because you would never think that. Just blows my mind. But I did want to, this just brought up some key points that I'd like to share with people, because we spend a lot of time talking about some of our personal experiences in nature and the things that and bring us joy, what we find beautiful about them. And there's a lot more that we can talk about there. But before it evades me, I would just like to hammer in on the concept of getting out into nature. And there's a lot of ways to do this if you want to experience the beauty of nature and to relax. And there's a lot of benefits to nature, which is one, like I said, relaxing yourself, helping lower anxiety and depression. There's so many benefits beyond that too. And to be able to plug into that, one, it takes time. You have to take the time to do it. It can be very hard. Like when I was sharing earlier that I had to go out of my way and even kind of risk it a little bit to get out into nature because it was the winter and I just had to get out of the city. There's probably a lot of people that feel like that, especially if you're stuck in a box in an even bigger city. But it's important to put in the effort to create that space from society and actually get out into nature. And when you're out there, you can go hiking, you can go running, you can do something that I call, or that has been referred to as forest bathing, which originated in Japan in the 1980s as a solution to a lot of overall stress that was created from modern society. And it's a pretty simple way of thinking about it, is just going out into nature and taking the time to sit there with your senses. So what do you like? What do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? And you're really just relaxing, maybe even sitting on the forest floor, just standing there, leaning up against a tree, whatever it may be. And for long periods of time, maybe it's an hour or two, just soaking in all of the sounds of the forest, whether that's birds or the wind, the rustling of trees, and of course the smell of moisture and the soil and feeling sunlight beaming down. And there's a lot of different experiences there. And studies have shown that there are huge health benefits to doing these types of things. Lowering blood pressure is a great example, but obviously just lowering overall anxiety, reducing depression, increasing well-being. So I highly recommend that, because I personally have done that. Is there anything on your end that you would like to share when it comes to just getting out into nature, being a bit more practical with how it benefits people?
Yes, I love forest bathing, and I really enjoy what you just said, because it reminds me that you have to make an effort to go out into nature. I think that's the hardest part, is just taking the first step, like anything else, but it releases and rejuvenates your nervous system, which is a beautiful thing. You can think of it as almost just taking the stress and lifting it out of your body. Some practical things that maybe are not as obvious to some people that have helped me in my life. If you can't get out into nature, it is possible to bring nature into you to an extent. And the way, besides just bringing plants into your space, which I recommend, I would say that materials that you surround yourself with and that you put on your body, they make a huge difference as well. And it is possible to bring in natural materials and to enhance your life and connection with nature. Like right now, I'm wearing sheep wool on my feet. Like it's literally the outside coat that a sheep grew. And I just think it's beautiful to connect with an animal in such a way through like a natural process that they've died of old age and you live on with part of them to enhance yourself, and you're embracing it with your skin and like connecting with that life. But also just thinking about using natural organics like cotton or hemp or whatever wool, like my hat is made of wool. It's just a beautiful way to have nature touching and feeling on your body. And there have been a lot of other studies showing that synthetics are bad for our health. To touch your skin, it actually messes with your skin's microbiome, and it also messes with your body's endocrine system, which throws your hormone levels off and lowers your testosterone. So it's incredibly beneficial to think about bringing in only natural materials into your life and your environment, and avoiding synthetic ones as much as possible. And I think even though that's not going to be as beneficial or as useful as going into nature, I would say it does make a very big difference. And that's like a day-to-day constant friction point where you can make a small change and have a huge difference. So I would encourage everyone to rethink their wardrobes and their local environment and what everything is made of in your space, and upgrade it to natural materials if you can.
I'm glad you brought that up. One other point on wardrobe, and unfortunately, I don't think there is a company out there today. After we build Lifeform and it's a success and everything, I think we should start a shoe brand, but that's actually all natural. But being able to get a pair of barefoot shoes, I think is also really a great way to connect with earth and nature as more often, at least, even if you are walking on side streets, asphalt, sidewalks, like being able to feel the earth beneath your feet is a really great way to just overall stay connected to nature. And even more so when you are going out into that, walking on trails or whatever it may be. Ideally, you're doing it barefoot when you can, but let's say it is really cold, for example, and you want some shoes on. Leaning into a barefoot type of shoe where the sole is basically nothing at all. It's just enough material between you and the earth to protect your feet in case you step on something really sharp, and so that doesn't make you puncture your foot and make you bleed. But it's so thin that you still feel a lot of the intricacies and the details. The bottom of your feet have way more sensors in them than a lot of your body, and it gives you a lot of information about your environment. And so when you have on thick shoes and you're just in the environment, you're losing a lot of information. And so to be able to plug and feel more one with the environment, especially when in nature, if you're not going to be barefoot, having some type of barefoot shoe that offers that connection, I think is also a really great piece of apparel or clothing that you can add to your wardrobe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can speak to that very personally because I've been wearing only Vivo barefoot shoes for 8 years now. That's all I own are Vivo barefoot shoes, and I love them. They really change the way that you experience everything. Even in the winter, like they have some thermal insoles and they're still very thin. And I can feel when I'm slipping, and I notice that I have more control and I feel more confident walking around in Vivo barefoot shoes in conditions that are worse, which is ironic. There are some companies that make all natural shoes, by the way. They do exist. They're just harder to find. And most of them are in Scandinavia that I've come across, or perhaps in the Netherlands. But Vivo makes some very good natural material shoes. It's usually just the soles that are a bit different, but they last a really long time. So the trade-off is kind of worth it. And you have to be a bit practical when you're talking about engineering and resilience and durability of materials, because I've worn all natural leather soled shoes in years in the past as well, and they just wore out very quickly, and I had to get them resoled. And I think the environmental impact of that was probably worse than just having a nice, good quality thin sole for other purposes. But like right now, my shoes are made 100% out of sheep's wool and skin. There's literally nothing else there. I mean, they're like my indoor warm slippers, but still, there are like options. It's kind of where you want to go with it, but I don't think that you will need everything needs to be a high standard. But the idea of having barefoot shoes walking out in nature is amazing, and it's totally worth it. There might be a little bit of a transition period, but you will adapt very quickly and you will enjoy it so much more, and your muscles will grow in your feet, and you'll get some different leg muscles that you'll be coming in, and you'll just feel better. You'll have better balance, stability. I think wearing barefoot shoes and doing yoga every day has completely transformed my life in many positive ways. So that was a really great call out. Thanks for pointing that one out.
Definitely. Okay. So one other huge part of nature that I really want to make sure we have some time to chat about is the fact that I think it's a huge catalyst for creativity. I feel most inspired when I'm in nature. And I find that nature is a really great teacher for a lot of us. And whether that you take that from the realm of science and we're studying particular types of organisms and geometry to be able to make more aerodynamic, whatever, for example, I think is really
bioengineering.
Cool. Yes, bioengineering, huge sector. And it's growing.
It's great.
And like leaning into that more and more, I think is the future when it comes to innovation, to be more congruent with nature in our innovation. But even for me, like on more of a artistic side of things, there's so much clarity that comes from looking at nature to describe my life and to be able to reflect on it and feel like I have any sense of comprehension of what's going on and what life is in the first place and where I fit into it all. And I wanted to take some time, and I'm glad you brought it up earlier, but I wanted to share some poetry that I've written that encapsulates a lot of nature and just themes there, because I realized that a lot of the poetry that I write, and I've been writing for a little while now, always leans into nature. At some level, I am referring to nature to get across some type of metaphor, to describe an idea, to make sense of the world for myself. And I figured I could just go through some poems. And if you wanted to ask any questions or make a comment in between.
Yeah,
It's fine too.
amazing.
But
I was
I can,
hoping.
or I can just go list them, just list them and read them. But poetry's huge,
I'm
and I
hoping.
write my best poetry in
Can you give
nature.
me like a
So
little bit of? That's. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting, but I want to like have a little moment after to reflect and say something about them because I haven't
yeah,
heard. I
yeah.
don't think I've heard these, so it would be fun to have a little live
You've
interaction. I'll
heard
keep it
some,
short,
and
but
if you yeah,
okay.
and it's probably been a minute too. So one, just as a disclaimer, these aren't all very serious. How I came up with these is I do a lot of just morning journaling, and sometimes I'll write really short haikus. And I try to write as much poetry as possible. And so sometimes it's not even that profound, but it's something that permeates my life. And so I was going through, like I said at the beginning, through tons of old journals, trying to find different bits and pieces of poetry that I thought were interesting, as I was preparing for this conversation. So some of them I think are better works than others, a bit more profound than others, but it just is interesting to see how poetry
Yeah,
and nature really go hand in hand and how I've leveraged it. So the first one is just a
yeah, go
simple
for it.
haiku. Soak in the sunshine, bathe in the day it brings you. Peace lies at sunset.
That makes me feel like living a human day, but focusing
Mhm.
on it through the circadian clock. That's fun.
Yes, I was very obsessed with circadian cycles at that moment in time. So I leaned into it. Okay, this one is another haiku. You are a seedling from which uniqueness will sprout, bloom, and shed self-doubt.
Nice. Heavy rhymes. That feels like something Tupac would have written in a great way.
Yes, these a lot of my haikus ended up rhyming, but I thought that was nice and short. But
I liked it.
this one gets a little bit more surrealistic. Maybe it doesn't even have a meaning. I'm not sure, but birds flying in my bird bowl, the illusion of freedom, standing 10 feet tall. The clouds of Jupiter, taste of honey. I gaze upon the universe. If I am a tree, do I bear fruit or money?
Well, that was beautiful. I'm a little bit lost at the money part, like how to connect it all, because
Mm-hmm.
everything was everything was so profoundly natural, and then like you almost get reminded that you're human. Maybe that's what the last line is. Maybe sorry, I'm just reacting real
It
quick,
kind
but
of is.
I think the
Yeah,
money
yeah.
was
No, that's
like,
in.
yeah, some part of being human that I don't want to be part of me, but it's there at the end, no matter
Right.
what.
I was writing this with the concept of like a lot of people are on the hamster wheel. And I thought a new way to do that was saying flying in my bird bowl because a lot of people have the other metaphor of swimming, as a fish, just swimming around and around day after day after day. What is life? And you just kind of repeat the same things, all in the pursuit of just having more money. And so I wanted to take it a little bit different. I felt birds were a bit more freeing. Um, and so,
Mhm.
you know, also love the metaphor that people are trees because I feel very connected to trees. I'm a tree hugger. I love being able to just go stand there and touch them and hold them. And there's a certain energy that comes from that. But I also envy the trees in a way. And it's just a beautiful metaphor in a lot of ways. When I think about roots and being able to spread out and grow in different directions. And if I am a tree, the question is, do I bear fruit or money? If you're in society, I think you have two options, or at least like a focal point. Like when I think of fruit in this poem, it's about vivid experiences, rich experiences in the moment, and enjoying life. And that's what I'm optimizing for versus continuing down this like hamster wheel or fish bowl or bird bowl, however you want to describe it, and pursuing money at all
Mhm.
costs.
Nice.
So
I like it.
that kind of ties into this next poem, kind of foreshadowed a little bit. I envy the trees, but the trees envy me. Cruel summer green, found in the space between the leaves, full of mystery. Who am I to me? Wild flower, help me be free.
Hmm. That was basically just a metaphor for Dante's Inferno, right?
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
I'm just kidding. That was that
um,
was nice. That yeah, that feels like the modern age hitting really hard, hitting home about not sure being sure how it's possible to be part of nature anymore.
right. I wrote that
Maybe I'm off
laying in the
base.
grass at a park, looking up at a tree, and the leaves were just blowing in the wind. And I was just asking the leaf to tell me its ways. How do you just flow so freely in the wind? And
Hmm.
I think, holds a lot of mystery in that, at least from when you approach it from the human perspective and you like try to analyze it.
I
And
love that because
yeah,
sorry, you made me think so strongly about how I am trying often to get out of these cells, these walls that are built around me from society that tell me I shouldn't do something or that I shouldn't explore or blow in the wind, right? I shouldn't allow myself to be the free flowing, natural, curious human that I am. And
mm,
maybe nature in that poem, it like brought back that idea of being able to flow without constraints because it's the natural way.
definitely. Okay, and I have one more. My favorite color is when sunlight melts over basil. My favorite sound is when my lungs fill with space, and the earth reminds my feet that I am home. The taste of yellow lingers as my tongue recalls time it moves someone I love. That's it.
That was like mic
Floors a
drop.
little.
I feel like we could just end the episode.